always thought leaving meant something dramatic, a final conversation, a clear ending, but that was never how I did it. My name is Michael. I'm 69 years old. I didn't leave loudly. I didn't slam doors or say goodbye the right way. I stayed too long. Then I faded. And now, looking back, I see how many endings I never finished, and how much of myself I left behind in places I no longer belong. I didn't know how to leave, so I learned how to linger. I stayed in places longer than I belonged. Relationships, rooms, versions of myself that no longer fit. I told myself patience was a virtue, that staying was loyalty. What I didn't see was how often staying quietly taught me to disappear. When things started to feel wrong, I didn't confront it. I adjusted myself instead. I spoke less, asked for less. I shrank my needs down until they were easier to ignore. Leaving felt selfish. Staying felt safer, even when it slowly wore me down. I watched others walk away when something ended. They seemed certain, decisive. I admired that from a distance. For me, leaving felt like admitting failure, like saying I had misjudged something important. So I waited for situations to end me instead. Most of my endings didn't come with goodbyes. They came with silence, fewer calls, shorter conversations, a gradual pulling back that no one talked about. I let connections fade rather than closing them properly. It felt gentler, but it left everything unfinished. There were moments I knew it was time to go. I felt it clearly. But I stayed anyway, hoping clarity would soften, hoping discomfort would pass. Sometimes it did, often it didn't. What passed instead was time, and time never came back. I thought staying proved commitment. I didn't understand that commitment without honesty can become a quiet form of self-erasure. I gave people versions of me that were easier to keep, while the rest of me waited silently for an ending that never came. Leaving properly requires courage. I didn't think I had. Courage to disappoint. Courage to say this no longer works. I avoided that moment again and again, convincing myself that patience was kindness, even when it felt like a slow goodbye to myself. Some people remember me as someone who drifted away. They never knew how hard I fought the moment of departure. I didn't vanish because I didn't care. I vanished because I didn't know how to stand in a clean ending without apologizing for it. Unfinished endings have a way of staying with you. I carry memories that feel paused, not closed. Faces I never said goodbye to properly. Places I left without ceremony. Those loose ends followed me quietly into the years that came after. At 69, I see how often I mistook endurance for strength. I stayed when leaving would have been healthier. I confused tolerance with love. I thought suffering quietly was noble. What it really did was teach me to accept less than I deserved. I don't blame anyone for how things ended. Most of the confusion came from me. My inability to say enough is enough. My fear of closing doors completely. I left many rooms with the lights still on, as if I might return someday. I carried the unfinished spaces inside me, believing time would eventually fix what I never learned to finish properly. There's a loneliness that comes from not knowing where you truly ended things. Unresolved memories linger, faces I never properly said goodbye to, places I left with no ceremony. Those moments surface at unexpected times, asking questions I never answered. I live with them quietly now, not angry, just aware of what I carried far too long. I thought avoiding endings would spare me pain. Instead, it stretched pain across decades. Sharp pain ends quickly. Lingering pain stays subtle but heavy. I didn't realize how much energy I spent holding on to situations that had already let go of me. Silence was meant to protect, but it only taught me how to carry absence like a companion. Leaving properly means honoring what was, without pretending it still exists. I didn't know how to do that. I kept relationships alive in half form, afraid to admit their natural limits. I stayed because I feared loss more than I feared honesty. That hesitation cost me clarity, leaving pieces of myself scattered in places I had already outgrown. Now I understand that endings don't erase meaning. They clarify it. I see that too late to redo most of mine. But understanding still matters. It brings a quieter peace, even when it cannot undo the past. Closure isn't loud. It is gentle, firm, and honest. I finally see that carrying endings incorrectly doesn't protect anyone, least of all yourself. Some nights I replay the moments where I should have spoken, where a clean goodbye would have mattered. I don't imagine different outcomes anymore. I only notice how often I chose silence over truth, because silence felt safer, less permanent. But safety is an illusion, and permanence is often what gives life its shape. Age doesn't hand you answers. It removes excuses. I see my patterns clearly now. Staying too long, leaving too quietly, carrying unfinished endings instead of placing them down properly. Awareness cannot fix the past, but it softens the weight. It teaches me how to notice before the next opportunity slips away in silence. I don't regret my life, but I feel the shape of what might have been lighter if I had learned to leave honestly. Clean endings don't make you cruel. They make space for the next chapter. I see the quiet harm of my hesitations, and I carry that awareness as a reminder of what careful honesty can do for both those who stay and those who go. If I could speak to my younger self, I wouldn't tell him to leave sooner. I would tell him to leave clearly, decisively, without apology, for honesty. To trust that endings don't cancel love. To know that speaking the truth of departure is sometimes the most compassionate thing we can do for ourselves and for everyone we care about. I'm 69 now. I never learned how to leave properly, but I understand why it mattered. I carried endings quietly instead of clearly, and I see the cost now. If this feels familiar, you don't need to respond. Sometimes just noticing, just hearing it aloud, is enough. Recognition itself can be a small form of peace.